Right, so hello, welcome to my talk, which is called How to Really Learn Vocabulary and Not Just Stare at Word Lists. And I'm Luke Thompson from Luke's English Podcast. Right, so what's the aim of this talk? Well, I want to help you to learn vocabulary more effectively and to show you different methods and resources for learning vocabulary. Okay? What I want to help you to do is to understand how to understand new words, how to record them, and we'll be looking at making vocabulary notebooks, how to remember new words and phrases, and then also how to use them. Because this is the cycle that you need to go through, right? You meet a new word or phrase, you have to understand it, then you have to probably make a record of it. You don't have to. You don't have to do that step, but you certainly have to remember words and then use them, okay? And you have to kind of keep going through this cycle. So, as we know, a wide range of vocabulary is vital for an advanced level of English. I think everyone knows this. Just in case you're not convinced, this is a little extract from the official Cambridge Advanced English Exam assessment criteria. So when examiners are assessing advanced English, this is the criteria that they use. So we've got grammar, discourse management, otherwise known as fluency, pronunciation, interactive communication, your ability to interact with others. And we can see that lexical resource, which basically means the range of vocabulary that you have available to you, is one of the most important ones, right? This is one of the sort of pillars of good English. And if you get a good mark in your CAE exam, if you genuinely have advanced English, then you should be able to do this. Use a wide range of appropriate vocabulary. So wide range meaning many different, a wide variety of different words and phrases. And appropriate vocabulary, that means using the right word for the right situation, right? And to give and exchange views on familiar and unfamiliar topics. So expanding your vocabulary is obviously very important, but how can we do it effectively? This is the thing. So here's a common mistake that I've seen as a teacher many, many times. And I've spent many hours in the classroom looking over the shoulders of my students, observing the things that they do. Here's a common mistake that I see. So here we have a learner of English. This is I guess his what he's written here, and he's got certain individual words and then just translations. I guess this is Hindi. I'm not sure actually, but this is a common mistake. Now, what's wrong with this, you might ask? I mean, first of all, this is actually not bad. I mean, anything is better than nothing, right? In learning English, doing anything is better than nothing. So this is not like the absolute worst thing you can do, but still, it's not quite enough, in my opinion. What's wrong with doing it this way? And I wonder how many of you have done this. Just started writing lists of English words with translations right next to them, or single English words on one side with maybe one simple definition on the other side. What's wrong with this exactly? Well, it's just single words with direct translations. There's no meaningful context in his notes anyway, as far as we can see. So the words here are just on their own. There's no actual sentence around them, no meaning around them. There's no grammatical context, definitions, parts of speech, collocations, pronunciations, synonyms, antonyms, formality level, or other details, right? Grammatical context, we need to know how these words fit into a sentence, what kind of grammar, are they connected to? Are they nouns, verb, adjectives? Obviously, what do the words mean? What words typically go together with these things, right? Pronunciation, how do you actually say them? These are kind of multi-syllable words, so where's the word stress? Synonyms, like similar words, opposite words, and other details that can help. The more connections you make to a word, the more likely you are to understand it, remember it, and use it correctly. And so other detailed notes are very important. I'll be looking at some examples of this in a moment. There are no mnemonics to help him remember the words. I think it was Thomas, you mentioned Darren Brown. He's a mentalist, a sort of a kind of hypnotist, and he, in one of his books, has written a lot about mnemonics. But these are little memory tools, little tricks that we can use to help us remember things, and they can be very useful for learning vocabulary, as we'll see in a moment. Direct translations like this can result in weird English because often English does not directly translate into your language. And it's not just a question of translating all the words individually and then just putting them together in the same way that you would put them together in your language. It doesn't work like that. And also we get false friends as well, which of course many of you will be aware of. And this is especially easy to it happens very easily when you're just looking at words on their own. They have to be within a meaningful context. So try to operate only in English. Don't translate everything. I mean, it's certainly at this level, if you're trying to get to an advanced level of English, you need to be operating exclusively in English. And this helps you to think in English and produce a more natural form of English. And you can see in the picture, he's just staring at the list, as far as I can tell. I mean, he's concentrating very hard, but he's not testing himself. He's not trying to use the new language to express ideas. Okay, so let's carry on. So how to notice and record new vocabulary. This is the sort of first part. Here are some things to consider. So first of all, you should look for words in context while reading or listening. So you're just reading a book, reading whatever text you're reading, and from that position, that's where you find your new language. This gives us a deeper, richer, more intuitive sense of what a word means and also how it works. We can notice how a word is used in a sentence, which helps us to learn the grammar of words. For example, if it's followed by a gerund or an infinitive or other structures, and also learn phrases, not just individual words. In English, as you have probably discovered, there are so many different phrases. And individual words can have many different meanings and also can be part of many different expressions. And I don't just mean idioms, but just multi-word expressions. So with continued exposure, just by reading and listening a lot, the nuances and grammatical context of a word are reinforced in a sort of natural way. And many of you will be aware of things like the comprehensible input hypothesis, right? Which is the idea that reading a lot and listening a lot, it just allows you to acquire language in a natural kind of way. I think there's probably a lot of truth to it, but also it's worth taking a more considered approach, I think, as well, as we'll see in a second. So the good news, simply read a lot and listen a lot, which is nice, but be mindful of the language you're consuming, meaning sort of be aware of a lot of the things I mentioned before about the different aspects of a word. Notice vocabulary as it comes up. So you kind of have that little part of your brain which is kind of going, look, there's an interesting expression. There's that word again. And look, I see it's always followed by this verb or in this sort of structure. Consider keeping a vocabulary notebook, but don't just write translations. And also there are other things you should do too. And we'll look at remembering and using vocabulary as well. But first, let's consider how to see words and how to record them. Okay, so let's look at an example of finding a word, noticing it, understanding it, recording it, and then remembering it and using it. Okay, so imagine you're reading an article about how to learn vocabulary, right? This is the article that you're reading. It just happens to be about the subject of this talk. So you're reading an article, you've got your vocab notebook ready to record some new words. So here's a paragraph from the article that you're reading. Okay, so I'm going to show you the paragraph here in a second. All right, so let me just read through this. Imagine that you're going to be picking up some vocab from this. So I could read the whole thing. Will I? Let's see. Bear in mind the importance of active engagement with the words you encounter. Instead of passively reading or listening, actively engage with new vocabulary by using it in sentences, speaking it aloud, or associating it with memorable images or experiences. For example, create flashcards with the word on one side and its definition, usage, or a related image on the other. By actively engaging with the words you learn, you reinforce your memory and increase the likelihood of retention. So let's now look for some vocabulary in there, right? And bear in mind, this talk is not, I'm not here to teach you specific vocab exactly, but just to show you the process that you could use. So in fact, the very first word, let's go with that. The very first word in the paragraph, which is bear. That's bear, right? So let's use this word as an example. Here's the word on its own. Now, when you see this word on its own, what do you think? What do you think when you just see that word on its own? Bear. Do you think of this guy? Maybe. Now, that might be the first association you have when you see the word on its own. But then the context will tell you a lot about the word. So if you just take the word away and look at the rest of it, in mind the importance of active engagement with the words you encounter. Okay, so look at the word itself, but also look at the other words around it. Now let's imagine now that we're adding this word to our vocabulary notebook. Now, even if you don't keep a vocab notebook, this is sort of like the thought process that you can take when you encounter new words. So for the word bear, what should we write in our notebook? Now, our friend from the previous slide would probably write a translation, but a translation doesn't give us the full story. So this is from DeepL Translator, and I've got English bear on one side and French, and it's come up with ours. Probably my pronunciation isn't great. Ours, I don't know, but anyway, here he is. It's this guy again. So it was a text about remembering vocabulary. What is this guy doing here? Anyway, so the point is that a translation isn't the right way to go about this, because a word has many more dimensions than just its translation. You can see how you'd be led in the wrong direction just by relying on translations. So here are the different dimensions of a word, right? Here are things that you can note about a word beyond just its translation. So you've got the definition, of course, the part of speech. Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective, an adverb? The word family. So what are the other related words? The related noun, verb, adjective, and so on. The pronunciation. If it's a verb, the past or past participle form. Synonyms of this word or phrase. As I said before, opposites, collocations, the grammar, how it fits into a sentence. The register, is it like formal, informal? Is it slang? Mnemonics to help you remember it, and example sentences, which is really important. So, I mean, this is all the stuff I just said, pronunciation, synonyms, collocations, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, of course, this takes time. Of course it does. But if you look at words in more depth and detail, you will probably understand, remember, and use them more effectively. So just choose the way that works for you. Obviously, this is always important. You've got to try different methods and approaches and find the way that works for you, but try to be a bit more thorough than just looking at lists. Find a balance between the number of words or phrases you learn and how much you research each one. Obviously, you can't go into all this depth for all of them. So you might, this is obviously an important question. Which words are the ones you prioritize? There are lists, actually. Oxford and Longman dictionaries publish lists of 2,000 words, 3,000 words, 5,000 words, which are the sort of like the base, most important words that you need to learn for a B2 level or a C1 level. I'll show you those lists in a bit. So you can use those as a sort of guideline for you if you want. You don't have to research every single detail of every single word, but the more you do, the better, ultimately, right? So let me show you an example then. Let's use the word bear as an example again. Here it is. So not him again, no. Because, of course, looking at the context of the word shows us that we're not talking about an animal, because it's bear in mind the importance of engagement. So sorry, bear, that's not you this time. Guessing the meaning of words is a very important skill which you should practice. Always guess what new words mean when you find them. This is like the first thing you should do. And it's an important exam skill as well, guessing the meaning of words. So, I mean, we've done this already. We know what the word is now, but still, this is how you can do it. You look at the phrase and take the word out and just imagine what else could go in that space that would make the sentence meaningful. So you might have like keep in mind the importance, or hold in mind. Maybe remember could be the whole thing. Bear in mind could also mean remember. And I think you would understand that from the context. So now we need to consider what to write in our notebook. Here we go. So remember this list. This is the list I showed you before, all the stuff around this pie chart. This is all the stuff you can write in your notebook, right? Now, how do you find out all of this stuff? That can be tricky, right? How do you find all this information? Well, if only there was a free tool that could tell you everything you need to know about new words. What could that possibly be, everybody? Well, it's dictionaries, of course. All right. Now, dictionaries are cool. You might look at this picture of dictionaries and think, oh, God, how boring. But no, dictionaries are cool. Look, just in case you weren't convinced, look, here are a few pictures to show you how cool dictionaries are. Look at these very cool people holding dictionaries. Look at him. He's wearing aviator sunglasses and he's got his collar turned up. This is what I put into Microsoft Copilot when I was preparing this. I wrote, can you create an image of a very cool guy holding a dictionary? And it came up with him. And then it came up with him. And I said, all right, can make an image of a very cool girl holding a dictionary. And it showed us her. So these are obviously very cool people, even though Microsoft Copilot can't spell the word dictionary, apparently, which is not a good sign. Anyway, so this is the Longman Dictionary, which I talked about with Claire in my recent conversation, which you might have heard. Other dictionaries are available. Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English Online, LDOCE Online. It's a really good dictionary. Other ones I use include the Oxford Learners Dictionaries and collinsdictionaries.com. But here is the entry for the word bear. Okay, this is what you get. This is actually just the first part of the page. I could scroll down, but this is the entry. And we can see all of the things I mentioned are all written here and more. In fact, it's probably worth looking at the dictionary entry in more detail if we actually have a look at the website page for that on the dictionary website. We can see, the word family across the top. Okay, we have the noun, a bearer, someone who carries something. The adjective bearable or unbearable. The verb to bear, the adverb bearably or unbearably, which you might have heard. It was, for example, Luke's presentation was unbearably what? Hopefully not unbearably boring, but unbearably exciting. I just couldn't contain myself. Then a number of different definitions, right? We've got the first one up there, which is bear as a verb. And we scroll down and down and down, and there's more and more details of just bear as a verb all the way down here, and we keep going. And then finally we get to the bear as a noun. So we have to scroll all the way down before we get to this guy. So in fact, we see, I should also point out, I mentioned those word lists before, right? Of the most common or frequently occurring words. Here you can see that with the S2 symbol, this means that this word as a verb is in the 2000 most commonly spoken words in English. So it's definitely one that you should learn. And if we go down to the noun, the bear, the animal, that's not in the list. It's not one of the most, one of the 2000 most common words used. I mean, unless you live in Canada or something, and you're constantly talking about bears all the time. But it's much more commonly used as a verb. And we have the phonemic transcription, bear, in American English, bear, right? You can hear it. That's British English, American English, past tense, bore, past participle, born. That's born, not I was born, but BORNE. So, different definitions to deal with something. And you can notice also, it's basically to deal with something painful or difficult or upsetting, like stand. And you should also notice that the examples are really useful, that often it's negative, it's something negative. And as we see, it's often can't bear or couldn't bear, right? It was hard. Overcrowding makes prison life even harder to bear. Make the water as hot as you can bear. The humiliation was more than he could bear. Okay? You can hear those sentences. And it's spoken in connected speech. So can't bear something, to bear something in mind. For example, I can't bear the heat in the summer in Paris, where I live in July and August. It gets unbearably hot, and I just can't bear it because I'm English. I'm not used to that kind of hot weather. To bear something in mind, meaning sort of that's the example we had, right? Bear the burden, bear the cost. I could go on. I mean, I'm not just going to explain all the uses of the word bear there as a verb, but it just goes to show all of the things I mentioned are all included here. Okay. let me go back to my talk if I can actually find it. Where is that? Up here. Okay. So moving on. So this is an example of something you could write in your vocab notebook. The word, pronunciations, the past form and stuff, definitions. Just three. I've just gone with the first three, which would be the most commonly occurring ones. Bravely accept a difficult situation. Some examples: she couldn't bear the pain. Life in prison is hard to bear. I can't bear the pressure. I can't bear the stress. I can't bear the heat. It's more than I can bear. I can't stand it, which is the synonym, right? Grin and bear it. Just grin and bear it. Like a difficult thing, we say just grin and bear it. Bear in mind, which is the one we saw in the article, meaning keep in mind, consider, and so on. The formal: bear the costs, burden, or responsibility of something. We've got the bear up here as well. Here he is, but this is the noun, the animal. And pronunciation is worth noting: a bear and a beer, right? This is a beer that you drink, and that's a bear that you try to escape from if it's chasing you, right? So instead of making lists, try to write pages for your new vocabulary. The more detail that you write, the more likely you are to remember. Quality rather than quantity. It might be better to do this digitally with Google Docs, for example. So there you go. Now that's noticing, understanding, recording words. The next challenges are how to remember words and then how to use them again in the future, right? So let's go back to this guy. So he's trying to remember words he wrote down earlier, as we saw. But what is he actually doing? As far as I can tell, it looks like he's just reading the lists, expecting the words to just magically drift from the page into his brain and stay there. That seems to be what he's doing. When trying to remember words, it's important to do these things. Let's have a look. Here's another list for you. So we've got remember words in meaningful context, as I said before. Don't just look at words in isolation. Include your words in meaningful sentences. Use spaced repetition to review language at increasing intervals. So this would be, I'm going to show you what this is like in a second, but this involves flashcard apps. For example, Anki or Quizlet that you can use on your phone or your computer. Right? Here's an example of one. So I was, there's the target word. I was something when I got into the college I wanted. It means extremely happy. The word is ecstatic, right? So this is just an example of a flashcard. And we can see here, this is the clue or question that you created. So you can create your own flashcard decks, and you put a clue in to help you remember. It could include a definition. Certainly an example sentence is really useful. You've got the answer. You'd actually write the answer in once you remember what it is. And then here is a little thing you can click one of these buttons to show how easy it was to remember. So if it was easy to remember, the flashcard app will show you this card again in 4 days' time. If it was, if you found it pretty good, then it'll show you again in about 10 minutes if you keep using it. And if you need to remember it again, if you didn't get it right, click this one, it'll show you that card again in a minute, right? So the ones you remember, it then gives you a lot more time before it shows them to you again and reminds you what they are again. This is spaced repetition, right? Words you get right, it then, takes a lot more time before it actually shows them to you again. And this is a tried and tested system that many people use to remember things. So yeah, you can create your own decks of cards. I think I don't need to go through all that. So that's the flashcards. You must try to practice active recall. This is one of the most important things, actually. Active recall, meaning retrieve new words from memory and test yourself. So force yourself to produce the words, use prompts or clues to help. So to keep it simple, this just means cover up the word that you're trying to remember and force yourself to actually produce that word and then check that you've got it right. Instead of just looking at it, staring at it, expecting it to leave an imprint on your brain, you actually cover up the word or part of the word and make yourself produce that word again. For example, you can copy and paste example sentences into a Google document and then replace the target words with gaps, including the first letter can help. I haven't done that here, but it would be like this. Sorry, I'm just having a few technical issues with my computer. Just with me for a moment. Now, of course, the word is bear because that's the word that we're using as an example. But that's what you would do. You'd look at that and you'd say it out loud and try to remember what the word is and say that word out loud. I think we should in mind that we don't have a lot of time to complete this project. There it is again, bear in mind. If you can't remember, you check. You just check the complete sentences and then go back to your list again. And you keep going back through your list, keep going back through your example sentences until you can just come out with them without thinking about it too much. The flashcard app, to be honest, helps this process. It makes it a bit more automatic. So that's active recall. Mnemonic tricks can help. I mentioned this before. These are like little memory tricks to help you remember things. Create word associations. So connect new words to things you already know. This is a really important principle in memorizing things, that you attach new things to things that are already in your brain. So this is how I remember the words for shoe, sock, and slipper in French, right? I live in France and I have to try and learn French. And the problem is that the words for sock, slipper, and shoe are very similar to me. So chaussure, so French people, you can tell me if my pronunciation isn't right. But anyway, chaussure, this is shoes. Chaussette is socks, and chausson is slippers, right? They're pretty similar, and I often get them mixed up. But I've come up with my own little mnemonic to remember what they are. So chaussure, you feel sure when they're on. You see, chaussure, you feel sure. It's not perfect, but it works. It helps me remember that you feel sure when you got your shoes on. So it's chaussure. That actually works for me. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to work. Chaussette, et is a diminutive form. So they're the smallest, right? They're the smallest of the three. And chausson is basically not the other two. If it's not chaussure or chaussette, then it's slippers. And also chausson, they slip on. Slippers slip on your feet. And that's the on part, chausson. So that's my trick for remembering chaussure, chaussette, and chausson. And it actually works. Mnemonics don't have to be perfect. They can be a bit kind of stupid, a bit ridiculous, a bit silly. In fact, whatever works for you personally, just go for it. Absurd and vivid images help you remember. So for this, you can think outside the box and imagine specific images which resonate with you. So if we go back to the phrase bear, or bear with me in this case. So we've got this sentence, sorry, just bear with me for a moment. So again, I use Microsoft Copilot for this, which can be actually really useful. You just tell it to create an image of something. So I came up with this. So here's a woman on the phone. She's dealing with a customer and she's saying, sorry, just bear with me for a moment. And there's literally a bear with her, which would be terrifying. Like, sorry, just bear with me for a moment. What? There's a bear with you? Yeah, okay, just give me a couple of minutes while I deal with this. Let's just bear with me for a moment. Then I just can't bear this any longer. This is what Copilot came up with. Here's a guy literally carrying a bear. Only you can imagine that would be quite difficult, wouldn't it? If you're trying to travel across town and you're carrying a grizzly bear. It's like, I can't stand it. I can't take it. I can't bear it any longer. I need to put this bear down. And then I'll bear that in mind. Well, this is where Copilot got a bit weird. And it came up with this image, which is like a bear in someone's mind. Whoa. But it's certainly vivid. So anyway, I'll bear that in mind, meaning I'll remember that. So absurd and vivid images. Make emotional or personal connections to new words. So use new language to say something which is emotionally significant to you. This is what I always try and help my students to do in classrooms. After we've done lots of vocab work, I give them a bunch of questions that contain the vocab and just get them to talk about themselves, talk about their own lives, and try to use the language. For example, if it's I can't bear it when, I can't bear the thought of, try to bear in mind that something, sorry, I'm just dealing with something, I'll be ready in a minute, just bear with me. So these are the sentence stems that I would give my students. You could kind of create similar things and then just try to talk about things that you find difficult or things that are unbearable. A good example in Paris is the Paris metro at rush hour. As you can see, it's extremely crowded. So the sorts of things that you could say would be, I just can't bear it when the metro is so crowded. I can't bear the thought of getting stuck on the metro when it's crowded. Try to bear in mind, this is advice that you would give to someone. Try to bear in mind that the metro gets very hot and crowded during the summer, so you should avoid it at rush hour. And sorry, I'm on the metro and I can't hear. Just bear with me for a minute. Okay, that's the sort of thing that you could produce using these sort of sentence stems or just using the target language. Okay, so here we go again. So use new words in controlled and free ways. So controlled practice helps you to get the form right. So that's just like maybe gap fills, you know. Free practice reinforces everything. That's free practice would be like you're just talking about your life or talking about things, trying to use the vocab in a more free or open way. Control practice would be, you know, just repetition, maybe changing the form slightly. Okay. And then what do we have there? Speak out loud. Don't just do it all in your head. When you're doing these things, try and speak out loud. Even if you're on your own, you can talk to yourself. It's okay if someone finds you, and if someone walks into your room and finds you talking to yourself, and they're like, "Are you okay? What's going on with you?" You can say, "Don't worry, it's all right. Luke told me to do it, so that's okay. That's totally acceptable."
الثيولوجي عندكم الحين لازم تسوي لها ريسيف لان انت
you could also ask ChatGPT or other tools, like I mentioned, Microsoft Copilot and other AI software can help. But ask ChatGPT to give you some conversation questions. And I actually do this with my learners in classrooms a lot. In like a few minutes before a class, I will put the language I need into ChatGPT and ask it to make some questions. Sometimes the questions are terrible, right? But all you need to do is think outside the box a little bit, and it's possible to, you know, generate some conversation, even using some of those dry questions that it comes up with. Here's an example. I've written, "Hi, mate," because I'm trying to be friendly with ChatGPT, and I'm trying to be friendly and polite with it in case it becomes all powerful and decides to take over the world. In which case, it'll hopefully be nice to me because I was nice to it in the beginning. So, "Hi, mate, can you give me some conversation questions to help me practice using these expressions?" So I've added the expressions. And then it came up with this. Here it says, "Of course, here are some conversation questions utilizing those expressions. Can you think of a situation or experience that you simply can't bear? What makes it so intolerable for you? Have you ever encountered a thought or idea that you couldn't bear? What was it and why was it so difficult for you to accept?" So this is where you would say, a situation I can't bear. Well, I just can't bear it when I get stuck on the metro at rush hour. Or a thought or idea that I couldn't bear. I just couldn't bear the thought of, I don't know, what would it be if my microphone suddenly stopped working while recording an episode of my podcast? That would just be terrible, wouldn't it? Okay, so you could also use ChatGPT to help correct some of your errors if you want. So you could say, "I'll give some answers to those questions. Can you correct my errors? I'm a learner of English." And it will say, "Of course." So here's an example of what I wrote, intentionally getting it wrong. I wrote, "I can't bear go to the supermarket when is busy." Obviously, this is wrong. And ChatGPT is very encouraging and positive, and it says, "Your sentence is almost perfect. Just a small adjustment. I can't bear to go to the supermarket when it's busy. Keep up the good work." So it can be very useful. You can use the app version of ChatGPT on your phone and speak into it, and it will speak back to you. So that's basically it, everybody. In summary, read and listen a lot. Input is vital. Notice new words and study them in context. Record vocabulary with lots of details, not just a translation or definition. Practice actively recalling the vocabulary from your memory. Flashcards, memory exercises, etc. can help. Think of vivid and personal examples or mnemonics to help you. Use new vocabulary actively to express yourself. Speak out loud with other people or on your own. Stay positive, enjoy learning, and do it your way. And the tools I mentioned, the online dictionaries, the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English Online to research words, flashcard apps like Anki or Quizlet to remember words, generative AI to create examples, conversation questions, and corrections. Youglish, which I didn't show you. Youglish is basically a video. It's just kind of a way to search YouTube, and you can find authentic spoken samples of words or phrases in different accents. For example, if you wanted to write "bear with me," you could just put that into Youglish, and it will give you examples of people actually using the expression. Also, lists of the most common words in English: the Longman Communication 3000 list, the Oxford 3000 and 5000 lists are both available. You can just Google those two things, and you'll find, those full lists, which will help you narrow down which words and phrases you should be looking for. But by the way, when you do these things, if you put the word bear into one of these lists, if you search for the word bear, it'll come up, but it'll say bear verb, which shows you that you should be looking for the verb form. And also always remember to look for those words and examples so you can see the full phrase. So you can see "I can't bear it" and "bear in mind" and "bear with me," right? And also, finally, of course, you should listen to Luke's English Podcast Premium, because I use all these methods and techniques when preparing premium episodes and PDFs, right? A lot of my episodes are about vocabulary, and I use all of this stuff, and I just kind of like put it all together for you, hand it to you on a plate, including all the memory exercises and the repetition stuff and all of it. You can find out more if you want at teacherluke.co.uk/premium info. And that is it. That's the end of my talk. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.